Motor City Mayhem is an annual Alpha Strike tournament held near Detroit, Michigan by the Motor City Mech Warriors. I decided to attend it this year. I grew up just a bit north of the Detroit area, so I'd be able to do a combination trip to both visit family and play some Alpha Strike. Each year, Motor City Mayhem has been focused on a different era of BattleTech's history. For 2025, lists would be pulling from the Jihad era. There was a 300 PV cap, with at most 16 total units, as well as caps on the counts of specific unit types, such as 12 mechs. Experimental units, aerospace, support vehicles, and artillery were not allowed. Skills could be anywhere from 2 to 6, but you were limited to at most 2 units at either of those extremes. There was also a limit of 2 units of any model, and for mechs those would need to be 2 different variants. Finally, there was a cap of at most 2 points of jump strong across your list. Another thing to keep in mind during list building was Eagle 1. Players would get 2 battlefield support strikes to use during each game. These could be any combination of light strike, heavy strike, light bombing, or heavy bombing, with at most 1 use per turn. That meant that units that were low on armor and structure could get picked off easily by air support. I decided to bring Nova Cats. I went that way because their paint scheme is my favorite out of all of my painted factions. Based on my experience at Southern Assault last year, I knew that heavy clan cavalry mechs could be pretty effective in a tournament setting. I wanted to have a mix of unit profiles though to ensure that I had some faster units on the board as well. Then I had a few models that I knew I wanted to include. My Turkina is the best showcase of the Alpha Galaxy paint job, thanks to its big flat torso, so it would be my Force's centerpiece. Then I had recently painted a Griffin 2C and a Jenner 2C as my newest Nova Cats, so I wanted to make sure they got played too. I fiddled around with the master unit list a bit to see what different configurations and variants I could fit in the 300 PV limit. I ended up arriving on a list that used a monstrous Turkina configuration as the anvil with a spread of other mechs that could move faster while still hitting fairly hard. The full list was 7 mechs: Turkina E, Nova Cat A, Ebon Jaguar B, Huntsman D, Shadowcat J, Griffin 2C, and Jenner 2C. With it as the centerpiece, I designated the Turkina as my commander. Motor City Mayhem is a single-day event with 4 games filling a Saturday. 50-some players gathered at the venue at 8 a.m., with the first game starting a half hour later. There'd be a lunch break at the halfway point, but other than that, we'd be playing games until at least 6:30 in the evening. The missions for the tournament's 4 games were revealed just before the games. Each would have a primary objective that could earn up to 60 victory points, secondary objectives for up to 10 victory points, and combat score for destroying enemy units that could add another 30 victory points. The first game's mission was Hold the Line. For this one, the main objective was to get your units onto the opposite half of the board. Secondary points could be earned for destroying the fastest enemy unit, having your commander survive and cross the center line, and getting every one of your units across the line even if they didn't make it to the end of the game. My opponent for this game was David. He brought a Draconis Combine list with a Charger 3K, Catapult K5, Dragon 7N, Quick Draw 5K, Wolverine 7M2, Jenner F, SM1 Tank Destroyer, and J. Edgar Hover Tank. My plan for this scenario was to have my fast units move up along the edges of the board while my heavier units pushed up the middle together. That approach generally worked, but I made a couple of mistakes in execution. After racing to the far side of the board, my Jenner 2C ended up in a duel against David J. Edgar. I lost initiative most turns, so I had a hard time returning fire as it plinked at my Jenner's back. I had hoped to get it across the board so that my Shadowcat or Griffin 2C could help, but I really should have just put its back to the edge of the board so that I could at least get some return shots at the little hover tank. Then I got my slow Turkina within an inch or so of crossing the center line. When it was that close, I should have just sprinted across, but it's hard to give up on using its firepower for a return. That decision not to commit to the mission cost me 7 of the secondary objectives' victory points. In the end, it was a fun and close game with David securing a victory. I forgot to snap a photo of the score sheet before turning it in, so I'm not sure what our scores ended up being. The mission for the next game was Fragile, Handle with Care. For this one, there would be 6 supply caches near the center line of the battlefield. The primary objective was to have units pick up cargo from the caches and then return it to your deployment zone. The twist is that the cargo is explosive. An explosion could be triggered by picking it up, moving too quickly with it, or taking a physical attack. Units with active probes got an advantage of being able to pick up cargo without the explosion risk, but could still suffer one in the other cases. My opponent for this game was Ben. He brought a Federated Sons list that had a mix of mechs, vehicles, and infantry. It was an Argus 6F, a Bushwhacker S2, a Griffin 4R, a Wolfhound 2, a Condor hover tank, a Saladin hover tank, a Cavalry attack helicopter, a Pandion, 2 units of Infiltrator Mark II battle armor, and 2 units of VTOL infantry. Ben's list had a lot more mobility than mine. He'd be able to move fast to the supply caches, but the risk of exploding when using more than 8 inches of movement would hopefully slow him down on getting cargo back to his deployment zone and give me a chance to destroy his units. On my side, my Shadowcat and Ebon Jaguar both had active probes, so they'd have an advantage at avoiding explosions when picking up cargo. Then my Jenner 2C, Griffin 2C, and Huntsman were all fast enough that they'd be able to get to the center and hopefully help retrieve some cargo. My Turkina and Novacat would be entirely focused on gunning down Ben's units and hopefully make him pay for any cargo retrievals. As we played, the buildings across the battlefield ended up giving Ben a good number of places to hide with his units, while at the supply caches and carrying cargo. That made it harder to take out his units than I'd have liked. I also forgot about my Eagle 1 the first couple of rounds and should have used it to try to kill off the Pandion right away. The decisive moment in the game was near the end. My huntsman had picked up a piece of cargo from one of the caches on Ben's half of the field and moved it into my deployment zone. Unfortunately, Ben managed to finish it off before I could deposit it at the end of the turn. That left me with 3 secured pieces of cargo to Ben's 4. We both only earned 1 secondary objective point for destroying an enemy unit while it was carrying cargo. I made up some of the deficit thanks to destroying and crippling enough units to have 11 more points for combat score, but that still left Ben with a 68-64 lead at the end of the game. With that game wrapped up, we were at the halfway point for the tournament. It was time to set up our forces for paint judging and eat some lunch. I headed down the street to get a cheeseburger, then made my way back to the tournament venue to take a look at everyone else's forces. As you can see, there were a lot of great paint jobs and display boards at the event. Unfortunately, this video would get way too long if I showcased them all, so I've limited myself to just some of my favorite pictures from when I was browsing around. Okay, time for game 3. The mission was Bunker Buster. Each of us got 1 big bunker and 2 radio towers on our side of the board. The primary objective was destroying our opponent's buildings. The bunkers were construction factor 30 with fire resistance and some damage reduction. The towers were only construction factor 5. The secondary objectives were for doing damage to the buildings in different ways: long range, short range, and physical attacks. For this game, I was matched up with Jonathan, also known as Carbon from the MRC. He had a Capellan list consisting of an Emperor 6A, a Victor 9B, a Cataphract 2X, a Helios 3D, a Hunchback 4P, a Vindicator 3LR, an Assassin 99, a Cicada 3F, and 2 squads of Fashi battle armor with plasma. My list was really well suited to this mission. My Novacat could throw 5 damage at long range, and with radio towers being immobile, I only needed 4 ups to hit even at long range. That let me knock out one of those on turn 1 and then the other on turn 2. Then with my Turkina able to deal 10 damage at medium range, even the bunker went down quick despite its high construction factor and damage resistance. And that still left a lot of my units free to target enemies. Then on top of that, Jonathan's dice betrayed him. As just one example of that, there was a turn where my Ebon Jaguar only had a few points of structure left, and he had to shoot at it with about half his force in order to finally get those few hits needed to take it down. His Fashi battle armor did do good work though, and a few of my units ended up with heat tokens on them. Unfortunately for him, the immobile penalty on the buildings was enough that even with a point of heat, it was no problem for my units to keep hitting them. After the buildings were gone though, the heat did make it a challenge to engage his units, and I know I had at least one turn where my Novacat needed to hold fire in order to cool back off. At the end of the game, I had destroyed all of his buildings and 2/3 of his force by point value. He had taken out my radio towers and damaged my bunker. Combined with combat score, that gave me an 87-46 victory. The mission for the 4th and final game was Karnov down. There would be 2 downed VTOLs and 4 VIPs across the middle of the board. The objective was to extract VIPs and hold the VTOL tokens. I had played this mission last year at Southern Assault and knew it was a lot of fun. My opponent for the game was Gary. He had a Davian list that was all mechs. It was a Victor 9KA, a Cataphract 5D, a Jägermech 7F, a Rifleman 8D, a Thunderbolt NAIS, a Shadowhawk 5D, a Spectre 5S, and a Fireball 10D. Our map was interesting for this mission. There was a large building that would block line of sight between the 2 sets of objectives, but otherwise the terrain was mostly just tall pillars. It was possible to hide behind those, but they were narrow enough that they'd only hide a unit from a relatively small arc. I decided to play aggressive. I moved my fast units up to try to claim as many of the VIPs as possible. My Shadowcat and Griffin 2C didn't survive, but my Jenner 2C was able to pull 1 VIP off the board for me. Then my heavier units pushed forward to keep pressure on Gary's units. His Fireball had tried to get a VIP on the first turn and died in the attempt, but his Shadowhawk and Victor did manage to carry 2 off the board. Those were his only units that didn't get destroyed. At the end of the game, there was a roll of the dice to see which VIP or VTOL was the governor, and that ended up being one of the 2 that Gary's forces had extracted. With 1 extracted VIP, 1 VIP in possession, and holding both VTOLs, I earned 25 primary objective points. Gary got 30 for the 2 extracted VIPs, and one of them being the governor. After secondaries and combat score, though, I had won a 49-44 victory. With that, the battles were over. After a short break for scores to be tallied, it was time for the awards ceremony. First, there were a set of fun certificates that were mostly related to list building. I got a prize for having the most long-range damage potential. There were also certificates for the most units, the fewest units, and a few other categories. Next up were the main prizes. These were an overall winner, then 1st through 3rd in Tactician, Painter, and Sportsman. Then there was a Player's Choice Award and the Golden Irby for coming in at the bottom. Here, my decision to build my list around my favorite paint job paid off, and I got the trophy for 2nd place Painter. When the rankings were shared later, I was in the 7th overall spot, which I'm really happy with too. After the award ceremony wrapped up, a bunch of us headed over to the local hobby store, RIW Hobbies and Games, that had provided gift certificates and coupons as support for the tournament. I picked up a few force packs there to add to my pile of swag that I'd be bringing home. And that concludes my trip to Motor City Mayhem 2025. If you want to hear more about the tournament, both the Coolant Pod and Mech Bay podcast have released episodes about it. I'll link those in the description below. Thanks to Steve for running the tournament, RIW, Fortress, and other sponsors for contributing prizes, and to everyone I played against for fun games. I had a great time at the event and recommend it to anyone able to attend next year. I'd also like to thank my supporter tier patrons for helping me make these videos. Thanks Jake, Joshua, Camilla, Cogwar, and Zachary. If you'd like to see more from me, you can subscribe here on YouTube, on Patreon, or at scottsgameroom.com.